Let's talk about LANs, because this is a big piece. Okay, so I've been working on LANs. You had some really fun conversations behind the scenes with some sources about LANs and why they're difficult to execute.
Players are told you should never, ever log into your account and play on a PC that is not specifically your PC that you own and you're the one who handles it. Ricochet is so in depth when it comes to these PCs. You have no idea what has happened with that PC prior to your use of it on a LAN. When it comes to things like the lag reduction or whatever you would call it for controllers on PC, those programs, those are considered a cheat and will get you shadow banned. That is the reason that there were a number of people coming out of the Baka Bros Wonderland who were shadow banned after the fact, was pinged on Activision's side as being a cheat, and thus they end up getting retroactively shadow banned for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another Bot Lobby podcast episode. I believe this is episode number 3, at least officially. I'm Gojj, joined by the wonderful, the only Katie Bedford, of course. We're going to be your hosts today as per usual, and again, we have a very special guest that we want to talk about. But before we get there, look, we appreciate everybody's support that's shown us so much support on YouTube, as well as our live stream, and even on our audio platform. I'm sure you guys are going to be listening to this later, so make sure you subscribe, like the video, and all of those good things. It helps us out in terms of continuing to grow this and make this even better process. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Super excited about this episode. One of the great things about competitive Warzone is that every time Gojj and I finish an episode and we say, shoot, what are we going to talk about next? Within 5 minutes of one of us saying that, something happens on Twitter. There's a tournament announced. There's some other happening that fills up our docket for the next podcast. So I think a further just proof of why we should be doing this in the first place. And yeah, we've got a lot to talk about today. Kind of a bit of a recap, and also talking with Ebatez about CDLR. We've got, of course, some dabblings in cheating allegations, monitor cams, LAN, and Ricochet, and shadow bans, and all the fun that comes with those twists and turns, and even more than that. So I'm great, Gojj. I think this is going to be an awesome episode.
Well, without further ado, let's bring the man in himself. Katie did say it already. It is Ebatez. We're bringing in Ebatez today. If you don't know Ebatez, the man is an incredible player in Warzone, has been competing for a while, has made the switch to like a full-time competing and content regimen, and really proud of the process that he's been able to take over the last probably year and a half. He's going to talk a lot more about that. So let's hop in with him and see how he's doing. Ebatez, how we doing, man?
Yo, what up? Thank you guys for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
It is really good to have you here. I know, Ebatez, you and I in particular, we've talked, I mean, I feel like it's been a good year and a half now that we've at least known of each other. I know I was reaching out to you about playing in tournaments way back in the day when I was hosting all those like small events. Events too, so it's good to kind of full circle and hear more about you and what you're working on. I mean, first and foremost, let's just jump straight into it. You know, Katie and I did the emergency podcast on Monday that was all around the CDLR, and you guys are a part of that, but in a little bit of different capacity. You qualified for it, so let's talk about it. I mean, tell me who your team is and kind of that process around the qualifiers.
Yeah, so my team right now, it's me, Ryda, who's a Facebook streamer, Finessin, and DJ Moss. And that team kind of came about because me and DJ have been kind of doing up for like a lot of these tournaments. And we were kind of talking about like the rule set and stuff, so nothing's really banned. So that's when I reached out to Ryda, because I know he's one of the best like Swiss snipers in the game. And also I know he can run a shotgun. And then also I think we tweeted out like needing one more. So that's when we scooped Finessin, because he's honestly probably one of the better Rebirth players that I know, just a smart player in general. So that's kind of how our team kind of came together, and it seems to be working.
What was the process like? Because you had the open and then the qual process, so it wasn't easy stuff to get there. There was many well-known household names in competitive Warzone who failed in those qualifiers to get to this point. So what was it? What was that process? Opens into quals.
Yeah, the first qualifier, like the open qualifier, the CDL playlist Rebirth, was kind of like, in my opinion, it was kind of lazy. So going into it, like we thought it was going to be a lot more like, yo, we're going straight into customs, like, you know, like a public match, like there's going to be like TikTok kids, whatever. And like our first game in, like I was like, yo guys, this is like a bot lobby. So basically it was just like 2 days of like 3 hours of TKR, and just like, and then it came out later that people were VPNing in it, and it was just like this whole nightmare. So like I don't even know if it was like a CDL specific playlist or if it just kind of combined everything. So like that first part was kind of weird because I thought like we fried, like, I mean, and I was like pretty confident about it. We got like 17th or something, like not even that great in the first round. So then I was just like, okay, like, you know, we'll weed out the VPNers, like obviously, and that's kind of happened throughout the other 2 customs. I thought it was pretty organized. I mean, the whitelisting, getting to the same lobby is super quick. They've actually had a really cool like scoring system and stuff. Like you report everything in Discord. So as far as like everything else besides the open stuff, it's been really like organized. And then getting to this point has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had talked about it on a couple episodes now about the kind of process to get into the CDLR and working your way through all of these different qualifying sections, and the TKR was a little off and weird because of the VPNs. And I mean, anytime you do anything TKR related, even if it is inside of a controlled playlist where theoretically you're having more sweats, you know, it's difficult to monitor. But once you make it past that stage, which you guys were able to do, you made it into the custom side. Let's talk about the customs rule set that you guys were able to not exploit but utilize, right, to do well. You briefly mentioned it, but let's go through it a little bit more, because I think this is a huge point for tournaments in general and why we have the systems that we have right now, right? So talk to me about, you know, Ryda and the weapons he's using and stuff like that.
So without giving away too much, I mean, like my thought process was like, we need somebody who's just like, there's a lot, like especially in customs, there's a lot of people that float in the air. And I was like, we just need a shooter. So like someone literally like, yo, like live ping like 300 meters away. Like, yeah, like there's a chance we're going to hit that shot. Like, and so I know Ryda like is just insanely talented on keyboard and mouse. And like, obviously sniping's a little bit easier. It's like Breadman or like Pie Man. Like any of those guys are just nasty. So that was kind of our thought process. And then also like, what's the biggest con to using a keyboard and mouse player is like close range fights. So we
got the close range. He can pick everyone else out of the sky.
So then we put him on a shotgun, like a Jack 12 fire shotgun or something with like claymores. And
Claymores.
Yeah, so like anybody that tries to push them, I mean, either A, they're getting hit by the claymore, or B, they're getting shotgunned. And then anybody that tries to float, like, yo, just stay alive, like we're just team wiping because they're floating too long or something. You know what I mean? So I mean, we put like a lot of like, we didn't put too much thought into like how we picked our roster. I knew like me, Ryda, DJ, and then Finesse would all kind of get along. It's kind of like a weird dynamic, but I mean, yeah, most of all is just like, we don't strategize around the shotgun either too. It's just like, that's just how it is. Like it's a public match. There's no ban. So like, we're just going to use whatever is not, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I saw people running around picking up RPGs off rip. So it's just like,
psychological warfare that you were committing on these people.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of people are like, dude, don't push that building. Like he's in there with a shotgun. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, I you know, there's a lot we can talk about around rule sets, but I think you're right. You have to be able to utilize whatever is available, utilize it, and if it works, it works. It seems like it worked in the customs. I mean, what place did you guys end up in the last customs qualifier?
In the last one we got second. So
nice. Okay, that's
we kind of cruised through the first one, and then the last one we played like Picnic's team, and them were kind of like, they watched our VODs and then they started landing where we were, so it kind of like slowed us down the first game. But we ended up coming in second, which was fine. I mean, you just need a top 4, so.
Yeah.
That's something that you're aware that you need to innovate on, since other people are adapting that strategy, or are you just going to keep it what you know?
I wouldn't say it was our strategy. Like we kind of took it from Tommy and them because they go stronghold, and like in the earlier ones, we were kind of sending DJ solo to go stronghold because there's so much money there, and like so we just kind of I mean, we switched up some stuff, but we probably won't do it in finals because we know that there's like Tommy going there and stuff, and like other teams, so. It's just not in our best interest, especially when there's only 4 games to like contest it, especially a top team.
Sure.
So yeah, we've kind of figured out some other plans, but it's
so this
definitely
is
like, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, there's definitely like a lot of people I've seen that are like watching VODs and stuff, especially in Rebirth. It's just so new. So people are trying to figure out like strategies and stuff like that. Like, but yeah.
This is very pivotal. What inspired the name of your team?
I was just thinking about Ryda. I mean, like he's just a dad. He's literally a dad. So I was like, let's just put dad bods, like whatever, be funny. I didn't want to take it too serious. You know, it's like team finesse. You know, I mean, like I was just like, let's just do something funny. Like I was just super quick.
Yeah,
I like it.
There were some good team names. I mean, you had the Goats, which is FaZe Blue Squad. I don't know where Tiberius Khan came from. I don't know if you have any idea.
No, that's a good name. I don't know where it came from.
it sounds like some I mean, I guess I'm thinking of Genghis Khan, of like some ancient warlord or something, but hey, whatever works, I like it.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So excited about the CDLR. Let's briefly talk about the pools and some of the teams that you're fighting against, right?
Yeah.
I think we had a really good conversation on Monday with our emergency podcast with Gary, talking about some of the pools and the strengths of the pools and the different teams. I mean, what was your first reaction when the teams were dropped, and especially the teams you're going to be playing against?
First reaction was like, all right, this is kind of lazy. Like, like, I don't know, like, it's cool, it's a CDL event and stuff, but like, we're letting Almond hop over to 100 Thieves. It's like, I was like fine with it. Like, I like, if it's a 100K tourney, I want TBE competing together, but also it's like, if it's going to be a CDL tourney and you're signed to a CDL team, why are we letting, like, it's like, Rocker's just like, yeah, we'll let our best player go play for another org, basically. And it's like, that just doesn't make sense to me. But like, again, it is 100K and I want to see TBE compete together. But it is what it is. So like, I don't know.
It's like, I think a great point, Gojj, that he just made too, and that's something that I kind of tease as well. Is like, I mean, I imagine it was more of a situation of not necessarily Rocker allowing it, but Rocker not really having a choice.
Yeah.
Almond saying, look, if I'm playing in this, I'm playing with the boys. Like,
right.
I think that was what it was. It was either I'm playing with them or I'm not playing in this at all. And they're like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah. There's a larger conversation there. I've been doing a ton of digging around the CDLR, because when the teams came out, I think all of us were like, wow, this is interesting. Like, this person's not playing, these people are playing. There's a lot we could go into with that, because I've done a ton of digging around the idea that you have to stream on YouTube, and that had maybe staved some people off and didn't stave off others. There's maybe some workarounds to that. Like, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that not everybody knows about. I think Katie and I will probably talk a little bit more about that later, but let's refocus back. So you've gone through the qualifiers. You're here in Group A. You've got some really, really good teams. Some teams we don't even know if they'll be good. I mean, what's your take on the idea of CDL players being, obviously they're like the most talented players in Call of Duty, but what do you think like their advantages or disadvantages will be going against people like you guys that play Rebirth all the time?
I just think it's hard for like players like that to come over and like just like it's the start. It's like starts are everything in customs, and like they don't really know how to play a start. Like as soon as they get a gun and they're, you know, they got a gun in their hand, like they're scary to fight. Like I'm not like there's no doubt about that. But it's like, as far as like rotating, like all that stuff, if they're not familiar with the map, like I know a lot of there's a full team of CDL players, like I know they haven't played Rebirth. Like it's just, there's like a mental, like you're more thinking about like what is going on rather than like what are we gonna do. So I don't see them doing well. I mean, again, like, you know, knock on wood, like hopefully, like I don't know, like we'll see, but like it's just a big mystery. I don't really know. I don't think any of the CDL players are gonna do well. In my opinion,
I think it's a toss up. I think there's a chance they could do really well because their gun skill is incredible, but at the same time, especially I will say with the rule set that we have, they're even more at a disadvantage. If it was limited to traditional bands and ARs and SMGs, they have a lot better chance. But when they're getting sniped out of the air before they can even realize where they need to go by Rita, or they push a building even two stacked and run into shotguns, you're like, I mean, sorry, I don't care who you are, you're not winning that gunfight. I'll be curious to see.
It's more similar to multiplayer, but less similar. And as you guys have said, right, there's no pretty little CDL GAs that the players come up with. It's the Wild West. Everything's available here. And I agree. I mean, on top of that, how are you making stim plays in the storm? What are you preparing for those final circles? How are you managing your utilities? And I tend to agree with Ebatez's opinion, especially when I look at some of these rosters with pros on them. I don't know. I'm not confident.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, anything can happen, but I'm not confident that they're not getting the placement. Like, you know, they might get some hot starts, but
yeah, sure. Yeah, the entirety of the event. Well, I want to pivot a little bit. We had talked about a CDLR a good bit, but I wanted to hear your opinion on it, so thanks for giving that. But I want to pivot a little bit and focus on you for a second, because again, like I said at the very beginning, we've known each other at least through association for a long time. You've been kind of coming up in the scene. You did really well. I remember one of my favorite things to talk about was back in late Verdansk customs. You really found a groove inside of those customs. We were talking a little bit before before the broadcast about an upcoming event tomorrow that you're playing in. I would love to hear your opinion on just formats in general from the tournament scene and what you've seen as kind of the ebb and flow of 2v2s versus customs, specifically on Caldera, because I know the Caldera map is a little bit different and more competitive in some ways and maybe less competitive in others.
So as far as like practicality, getting everyone involved, like customs is definitely just more appealing to like Twitch rivals or like, you know, big tournaments. 2v2s, I think in my opinion, are a little bit more exciting as far as like a competitor standpoint, a viewer standpoint, everything. I think 2v2s really do like just like make the scene like excited and for like what is Warzone or competitive Warzone. So I don't know if I love customs as much as I used to. It just sucks how like choppy they can be. I mean, like me and DJ were playing with Frozone for a while and he's just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm done competing, because he's like, I'm just sitting around for 3 hours, like, you know, just like staring at my desk. Like my viewers are just dead in chat. It's like, I'm just done. Like, so like, I don't know. I think 2v2s are definitely, in my opinion, probably a little bit better. But I mean, I get customs because they can just get everybody included, especially for like rivals. It's just kind of nice to get everyone in the same lobby and it's fun. It's like, oh, they're battling it out and stuff like that. But that's kind of like my take as far as like where competitive stands right now. I think Rebirth has been great. Again, because it kind of like bridges the gap where it's like, it's fast paced. If you die off rip, you're only sitting around for like 8 or 9 minutes. You're not sitting around for 30, 40, you know, waiting for the next lobby to start. And there's also a lot of opportunities like where they could do like heats. So they could do like a lot of Rebirth, like, you know, 3 different Rebirth lobbies and then top 5 from each go to 1 lobby or something. I don't know. There's a bunch of options, I guess, as far as like that stuff. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll be curious to see where the rest of our tournaments go up until Warzone 2. It sounds like Rebirth is going to be a main priority going forward. I mean, everything we're seeing is denoting that. So, you know, there's a good chance we'll see quite a few more Rebirth tournaments. I even know that is going to be the case. Okay, well, look, general tournament scene, Katie, I think this is a good time to start talking a little bit more broadly about the tournament scene from an overarching perspective, because you've been in the weeds of it, specifically from the grassroots side of things for a while now. And even more recently, it's been a problem for a while, but even more recently, there's been a lot of issues with cheating allegations, sus allegations in general, people being like somewhat
removed from events due to it.
Removed from events or dropped from their teammates just based on one little thing that will happen because it's not worth the pain and suffering of going through that. I mean, would love to hear your take, not even necessarily about specific people in the scene, but like, where are we at right now in your opinion with the competitive scene, with cheating allegations and with the mentality of like, hey, if you're you know, small and you are really, really good, there's a very high likelihood that you're cheating.
Yeah, so for me, like from my perspective, there's no like structure and there's also no like authority really. So like if someone, you know, is getting called out or something, it's like, who's gonna say what about what? It just feels like right now it's players jumping in and saying, hey, I think this guy's cheating, and then people are getting removed, which is like, I get it, like it's their livelihood, but it just feels like sloppy. And also just like, I don't think players should be making decisions on who gets to compete and not. It just, there's no like there's no authority. Like nobody is making the calls. Like nobody is like, I don't know. It just sucks because, like, you know, who knows whether, you know, the people that have been removed or whatever are accused, like, who knows if they're cheating or not? Like, nobody really knows. I get it. But it's like, we're just letting, like, the opinions of, like, you know, maybe bigger players kind of make decisions on for everybody else. So just, like, I personally hate it. I think it's lame. And, I mean, but I don't know the answer. That's also why, like, I don't know. Like, I don't play these buy-in tourneys anymore because I'm like, who's cheating? I don't know. And I don't, like, there's nothing we could do about it. So it's like, I don't know. It sucks, but it's just the state of Warzone right now, which is, it is what it is. But
I mean, really, Gojj, it feels like we're in kind of like Salem witch trials era. Like there's just this fever of everyone's a witch. Like go to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right? Like they literally slapped all this stuff on this girl and they're like, she's a witch. And they're like, but the nose is fake. She's a witch. And sometimes they are in fact a witch, and other times, oftentimes they're not. And it just doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason to this. And the bigger you are, the safer you are in both feeling like you can throw out these allegations without repercussion and yourself being safe from those allegations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just sucks, but I don't know the answers. And like, it goes to like an extent, it's like, so like people are trying to prove themselves and they're like, they do something and it's like, oh, it's not enough. You know, there's still this. It's like, it's never gonna be enough. So it's like, it's just a dead end of just like trying to prove that you're not, you know, you're innocent or whatever. And then everyone's just like, well, I still in my mind, I saw what I saw and I believe what I believe. So you're not changing my mind. Like,
There's a lot of very smart people that have done a lot of thinking and breaking down of like psychology of people and changing people's minds on something they've already decided is truth is very, very difficult, right? I think the question I have, I know it's like near impossible at this point, but I guess what can we do right now? Like, let's jump into that conversation. I know there's been a lot of tweets on the timeline about monitor cams being something that has to happen, and maybe some other options as well. What would be like your take from a grassroots person that's coming up through the scene, trying to do the best they can to not only stave off any accusations, right? That's always something that I'm sure is in the back of everybody's mind is I need to make sure I don't ever get accused, because once I'm accused, we might have some serious issues. But once you are accused, what are the little things you can do at the base minimum to try to help out in this situation?
I think it's just as far like you just got to take like ownership in like your own like character, I guess. It just like be proactive as far as like, yo, they think I'm cheating, I have a monitor cam ready, or yo, they want my PC scanned, like let me tweet out who can scan my PC right now. Like I know I talked to Hisoka about it, because I mean people were saying that he was you know getting thrown in the mix, and I was like, look bro, like I was like, get somebody on your PC right now, have them check it, like be proactive, don't wait for someone to come to you. Just have someone, you reach out to someone and tell them like, hey, like this is my livelihood, this is my career, I guess, quote unquote, like get someone to take, you know, like there's got to be some kind of ownership. Like people are just so like, oh, just wait until, you know, I get my PC scanned by someone who comes to me. And it's like, dude, like if you think that you're getting accused or whatever and you want to prove yourself, like just be proactive. Like I don't know, like don't wait till someone else is going to step in for you. So that's just like my biggest advice. It's like there's just too much like unknowns. Like people are just like doing weird things to like not like completely clear themselves. Like there's like little like there's just too many gaps like that are like just not being filled, and it's just like it's weird to me. So like, because if I'm getting accused, like I'm getting on a stream or something, I'm getting someone on computer right away, everybody's gonna be watching, like, but there's too many like I don't know, like, oh, like where did he go for 3 days, you know what I mean? Like it's just like what happened, like I don't know, like I just wish there was more proactivity as far as like people trying to like take care of themselves rather than like having other people take care of them. That's just where I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the right. I mean, like you said, there's no true answer. Like there's no if you do this, you've proven your innocence, and we all know that. But there's a something to be said about proactivity, like getting out ahead of it. If it happens, like immediately you're jumping on it and saying, "What can I do?" Because it is people's livelihood. We don't even have to put that in air quotes. I mean, Hisoka was being accused. The man has won $33,000 in 5 months. That is a livelihood. That is real money, very real money, especially if your expenses are not very high. Like that's livable, if not more than livable. And so, and even people lower down on the earnings list that are winning $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in 5 months. That's still great money that anybody would be lucky to have in that amount of time. And so you have to be proactive if you want a future. And I think that can extend outside of even the hacking conversation and can extend into other issues. If you have other issues, social issues, or, you know, I don't want to name names necessarily because we'll talk more about this later, but like, you know, you say something wrong and people get really frustrated the way you're reacting, and then you start not getting invited to tournaments, even if it's not a super serious thing. If it is, of course, be proactive. But if there's something small, the more you can do to help yourself, the better. And I think a lot of people are young in this space and don't quite understand that, like, hey, this is a potential livelihood that I'm working on, and if I don't take this seriously and try to act like a business person, I could lose that livelihood, right? And I think a great example too is like, let's talk. We don't have to talk about Shifty for a long time, but let's talk about Shifty for a second. At first, it was like, oh, I'm not gonna bow my head to anybody. It was a little bit of he would say the same, an inflated ego kind of thing, where like they're accused me, I don't give a shit. Like I'm the best that's ever been. Like I can win against anything. But then you saw a huge shift in the way he's been talking about it more recently. He kind of woke up to the fact that like, hey, if I'm gonna start competing again, I'm gonna do everything that I can. So he started doing his monitor cams, he started doing some foot pedal cams or whatever, right? Like even he came on the podcast with Katie and I and was very humble with the way he was talking about it and saying, look, all I want to do is compete. I want to do whatever I need to do that. And I think that's the right way to do it.
Exactly.
But doing that immediately is so important.
If it was from the beginning, I don't think Shifty would even had a problem. And I've talked to him about it. Like I'm fairly close with him. He knows that, but so he's doing right things now, and it's good. I think he'll be fine.
Well, I think too, when you look at things like this, it's depressing to me that this is also the place that we're at, where it's basically it's putting the burden on people who don't even realize that that might be a burden that just today they wake up and have to carry, right? Like, I think you can look at Selly, for example. She had an issue with a clip that someone pointed out the other day, and she did take the steps, Ebatez, that you mentioned, immediately was saying, check my PC right now. Like, let's do this right now. She ends up getting dropped from a 50K tournament because of that clip. And I understand, I think, Gojj, when we talk about treating this like it's a business, treating it like it's a job, because realistically it is, but it's also a deeply unfair burden that gets thrown on people with no recourse and no forewarning either. It can be one clip that vaguely has something that looks a little eyebrow raising that could be perfectly innocent or maybe not, and then suddenly your entire perspective has to shift. And I think there's core issues there that we really need to try and figure out a way to address, so that when this does happen, there's a more equitable and fair way for people to kind of come back from things like this. And I think that's a big part of it as well, is how do you come back from this, and how are you allowed to come back from this? Because people are never, there will be many people who will never believe you unless the person they are a fan of says they believe you.
Sure.
And until that happens, like, for example, if you're a fan of Scummin, you're never, ever, 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 ever going to think Shifty's legit until Scummin says something about it. If he, I don't think he ever will, but if he does, then you can turn there and be like, oh, well, I believe everything Scummin says, ergo Scummin said this, and I don't have an opinion of my own because I don't think on my own. And now I guess I forgive him or don't. And there's just so many issues there when I look at this from kind of the 30,000 foot view of how do you begin to deal with that aspect of it, kind of the roots of the problem that then trickle down what we're talking about now.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's a big one. And I don't even speak as if I have an answer to it. I just like it's these just fundamental deep problems that kind of put these people in consistently reactionary. I guess what I mean to say is it seems like people are in a position right now where they cannot be proactive. They can only ever react to things that are outside their control. And that's not ideal to keeping a healthy grassroots community in Warzone, right? Because I'm sure there's people who have either been cut off at the knees by things like this, or look at people like Shifty or whoever else and say, damn, I don't know if I want to go through that. Even if they're legit, I don't know if I want to try and compete in Warzone because I don't want to end up like that person. And that fundamentally at the grassroots level makes me very concerned as well.
For sure.
To jump this even one step further, so for you, Ebatez, like with all of this in mind, with where we're at in Warzone, I know you're going to continue to compete. You're competing tomorrow in the customs tournament that Boom's hosting, that we're going to talk a little bit more about later, Katie and I. But what's kind of the future of Ebatez look like? Is Warzone content and competition really where you're going to continue pushing up until Warzone 2 and really kind of play that, hey, I'll be here till the end, I'm the ride or die, so that when Warzone 2 you can kind of take off? I mean, I know you're streaming on Facebook now, and that's seen some limited success. I mean, talk to me about the future of Ebatez.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as competing, I feel like I lost like a lot of my like desire to like prove myself kind of thing. It just sucks. Like I know I have like this fire in me. Like when I was earlier, Verdansk and Customs came out, and I just like I would do anything to win. And like I know I'm like much busier doing content and stuff like that and streaming, and I'm doing doing other stuff, but it just like I don't have that passion. And it kind of, I feel like I got a little bit of it when these rebirth tourneys started going up, so I'm feeling a lot better about competing. As far as competing, I don't know. I mean, yeah, kind of just like cruise control until whatever's next, especially with all the cheating accusations. Like I told you, like talking to Frozone about it, like he's like, I'm done. Like, and it's just it sucks like getting into a tournament and you're like, well, they might be cheating. Like, you know, it's like it should never be like that as a competitor. Like, well, the person that just killed me, like they might be cheating. I just don't know. So like it's just so like mentally exhausting sometimes. So for me, like I'm just locked in right now on content stuff. I feel like I had some people like teach me a lot of things about how to do content, how to brand yourself, and so I've just been kind of diving into that. But as far as competing, I mean, me and DJ, we kind of do our thing, and I think me, him, and Finessen are gonna move forward, just running tourneys together, and it's just a good group. Like we don't have egos. Nobody like obviously we want to win, but if we lose, like we're just gonna talk about what we can do better next. So I don't know. I mean, like right now just cruise control on competing, and then just full throttle on content, stuff like that. Love it.
Is content going to be focused around Warzone up until Warzone 2, or are you going to start branching into some other stuff?
I'm doing just rebirth stuff right now, which seems to be hot. But I mean, I'm just gonna probably go with whatever's trending. I mean, at the end of the day, like we were talking about, this is business. So whatever, whatever I need to do, I'll make sure I do it.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
When I look at this, and I think everyone should diversify their bonds, if you will. You should always have eggs in multiple baskets. But it kind of makes me sad, Ebatez, to hear you say that when I'm literally staring at your Twitter right now and your pinned tweet from only a few months ago, let's be real, in 2021, that you were the 75K Twitch Rivals champs with IQ and arrays. And the fact that you're saying that your fire for competing has died when you are someone capable of that is it makes me sad. And I mean, I wonder, I know you've kind of talked about a lot of things, but are you able to kind of distill down a couple specific points of what kind of killed that drive? Like 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of expectations for the new map, and I just don't know if I personally enjoy it. I know a lot of people do like it. And then, yeah, I don't know. I just don't enjoy it. And so it's like tough for me to like, just between the loadout stuff and then like, I don't know. It's just too many like factors it just felt like a different game. It wasn't like the same Verdansk Warzone. It just feels different. So I think just between that and then like not getting my groove or, a set trio, it just kind of like spiraled into like, it just started snowballing into like, like I don't like this as much as I used to. Again, like I said, like I'm still competing, like I'm still going to try my best, but I just don't have like, I used to sit in court, for hours and watch VODs and do all that stuff. And like, I don't do that anymore. I just don't I don't have that willingness to like learn or do whatever it takes. And it like, yeah, like it sucks, but that's just more so like my reasoning. I think it's just like between the new map, not having like a set trio early on, and then like just not liking the game, and Rebirth doing really, it's just more fun for me, more fast paced. So it feels like normal Warzone, like, what it's supposed to be. So
there's a lot. There's a lot of people that share that sentiment. I mean, Rebirth is taken off. We've got the 100K right now. There's multiple Rebirth tournaments coming down the line. I know the CDL is more focused on Rebirth outside of even, this event ahead of us. There's 50K coming. I mean, there's a lot of events coming around Rebirth, and it's shown also with viewership on the content side too. I know you said it was picking up. It's kind of hot right now. That's been the case. I mean, there's a lot of people that agree with you, so that's not a dissenting opinion. I mean, Lucky basically said the exact same words you just said, right? He doesn't like Caldera at all, and he loves Rebirth, and so he's going to play what he loves. I respect that. Okay, last question, and then we'll let you go. Along the tournament realm, one of the biggest things people are promoting as best they can, saying this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen, is the conversation of LANs. Katie and I are going to talk more about it after you hop off, but I want to hear, number one, your opinion on LANs, of course, whether you think they would be fun and worth doing, but also, like, I guess another question to ask is, like, are you willing to travel around the country to play in LANs right now?
Yeah, so LANs I'm super excited for. I went to a bunch of Fortnite ones. That's actually kind of how I met like Super Evan and them. They did like a lot of the Fortnite stuff and like colors, and so I'm super excited for it because I just like think about like TwitchCon and all that stuff like years ago. I'm excited for it. As far as like traveling and stuff, I think it's going to be difficult for a lot of people, and I think we're going to hear a lot of excuses as to why people can't go or something. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, I mean, hopefully not, but I'm excited. I mean, hopefully there's a big one and everybody can get involved. Whether that's qualifiers or whatever. I'm excited. I think it just kind of gives people like, yo, like this is a big deal. Like, let's get involved instead of like, yo, $100,000 tournament on Thursday. Like, be there. Like, people could be like, yo, we got 100K LAN. Like, we got to qualify. We got to do whatever. Like, let's get to that stage. That's a big stage. Like, people are excited for it. So I think it could kind of, respark like a little bit of fire, especially myself for like competing and stuff, which would be fun.
Do you think the TOs should be covering all or a portion of travel?
No. I think it's like kind of like a bet on yourself kind of thing. Like, like if you want to, I guess like, hard to say.
Let's phrase it this way. What's the minimum you would travel for? Like if it was, what's like a general area that you live?
I'm in
like
Charlotte.
Okay. So how far would you go for how little money? Like $10,000, or it's got to be a 25 or a 50?
I think it's got to be a 25 plus minimum. Okay. I mean, yeah.
Something that basically, essentially, at minimum, is going to cover your expenses.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it's like, but the thing is too, like money also kind of brings hype to the event. So like, if you're going and you're like, yo, I'm going to this like $100,000 Twitch Rivals LAN, it's like, even if I don't win, like, hey, I still got to meet a bunch of creators and it was worth it for me. Like, you still got, I hope there's enough build up where it's like, it's not just about competing. It's like, it's an event, like, right?
Yeah,
like people are going to go meet each other, whatever that might be. So. Yeah, but I'd say like, I mean, to bring enough attention, like, oh man, for a LAN, probably 50 minimum. I mean, yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people share the same sentiment. I totally agree with you. Even if you go and you make $0, you can kind of like write it off as a networking expense, right? You get to spend time with people. You got a whole weekend if it's in a good area. I know a lot of people like to gamble. I'm not promoting that, by the way, but you can if you'd like. Fun opportunities. I know, like, even I had an opportunity to go to Champs last year, and that was just so much fun. I wasn't competing, and it was just a great viewer experience, right? And I was somebody that was meeting people. It was the time I was first able to introduce myself to like JoeWo and Exact and like Super Evan, like all those guys in person, which was really fun. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to that aspect of it even more so than the competing side. Although the big conversation piece is all of this could be fixed from the hacker side to everything with LANs. And good to hear you're kind of in that sentiment of like, hey, I'll travel. Let's make it happen. So
for sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Really cool. Well, hey, I think that's all we got. Ebatez, thanks for joining us today and giving some of your opinions and things. I know you hopped in late, and it was really cool to hear your perspective around CDLR. Good luck in that, by the way. I think we both project you guys to do really, really well in that tournament. So, again, really appreciate you.
I appreciate y'all. No, thanks you guys for having me. I'm super grateful. So,
yeah, man. All right. We'll check you later, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
All right, y'all. Peace.
Peace.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. I think that was great. When it comes to having someone like Ebatez on, I think that perspective is extremely valuable to get kind of like the top perspectives and everything in between. So, I mean, that insight from him specifically when it comes to like, how is this impacting creators and competitors that aren't within, I would say, that golden circle.
Yeah.
The untouchables of the wager chat, if you will. How is this, whether it's the allegations, the state of Caldera, etc., impacting you? And I can't stop looking at that. Like, you have a Twitch Rivals winner, you won a $75,000 tournament, and a few months later, you're saying you're not interested in competing anymore. It's just a sad thing to see.
I know. It's really Caldera. Like, I think some people really like Caldera and have really thrived on Caldera, but other people don't. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, I think there were people that weren't that good on Verdansk that are a lot better on Caldera for whatever reason. One of the main reasons people are saying is because they're cheating, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the map just plays different, right? And if you really grind the map, especially with not everyone competing on Caldera anymore, there's more of an opportunity for newer faces to make a name for themselves. Hisoka is a great example of that. There's others, but Hisoka, I mean, he's top 7 earned, running tournaments as many as he can. But let's continue the LAN conversation, Katie. This is the big piece. This is what we've been wanting to talk about a lot today. It's really good to have Ebatez on, and a great segue into this conversation, because you and I have had a chance to talk a lot more about LANs behind the scenes. I will tell the public this right now, for the thousands and millions of people watching, I'm sure, that we have right now, right? I have been working on putting together a LAN. I'm not trolling you, for at least 8 months now. Between there is a like 2-3 other events I was trying to do. I have a new one that I'm working on now. They're all LANs, and they're all exciting, but they're hard to execute. And I want to talk about why they're hard to execute. What's up?
30 seconds ago. Okay, we're gonna get to this, but 30 seconds ago, Clutch quote tweeted Swish and said, "We've made peace privately. Glad we could move on plus grow from this."
Okay, we'll get
to that, but whoo, baby.
For those that are unaware, we talked about this on 2 episodes ago in very intensive detail, and we're gonna get to this conversation because Clutch even responded to our VOD about the idea, saying that maybe that wasn't possible or otherwise. We'll get to that. That's a big piece of drama. Thanks for sharing that, Katie. Let's talk about LANs, because this is a big piece. Okay, so I've been working on LANs. You had some really fun conversations behind the scenes with some sources about LANs and why they're difficult to execute. Everybody at home knows LANs are expensive, right? The biggest barrier to entry that everybody understands is that LANs cost a lot of money compared to an online tournament. A lot of logistics, a lot of personnel. There's no question about it. But let's jump into, besides that, and I can break that down a little bit more, let's jump into some other issues that come with LANs, potentially Shadowbans, which is teased in our title, and potentially some other issues. So, Katie, what can you give us on info around that topic?
Right. So LANs are, as we know, the staple of kind of proving your innocence or proving your validity as a player. You're all in a set environment with set PCs that you cannot tamper with or otherwise use. All the PCs are same across the board for all the players there. So from the competitive side, from the TO side, LANs are kind of that perfect environment for player validity. Unfortunately, there is a direct conflict with LAN when it comes to Ricochet and it comes to anti-cheat within Call of Duty. And that conflict, and this is something that I heard directly from sources, primary sources on that matter, is that what happens with LAN and the problem with LAN when it comes to Ricochet is that players are told you should never ever log into your account and play on a PC that is not specifically your PC that you own and you're the one who handles it. Because Ricochet is so in depth when it comes to these PCs, there is no guarantee. You have no idea what has happened with that PC prior to your use of it on a LAN. And there are certain programs on these PCs that are generally accepted by players as necessary. Like, for example, when it comes to things like the lag reduction or whatever you would call it for controllers on PC, those programs, which are massively used by and large by pretty much everyone to reduce controller input delay and all of that, those are considered a cheat and will get you shadow banned. That is the reason that there were a number of people coming out of the Baka Bros Wonderland who were shadow banned after the fact, was because they were players who you might be whitelisted, you might be fine on your own setup, but they then went to a computer and logged onto it and were using things like this overclocking software and so far that was pinged on Activision's side as being a cheat, and thus they end up getting retroactively shadow banned for it. Those shadow bans are then removed after conversations are had. But that's a huge issue with these LANs, and one that has no easy resolution or solution right now is that Ricochet is going to be able to see into your PC and know what was, what is, and probably what could be at this point. Right. It is able to see into the hard drive. It is able to see everything that's happened on that PC. And when it considers things like overclocking software for your controller as a cheat, that's a really big issue and a huge risk for these players when they go to these LAN events to potentially come home. And yeah, maybe you went to a LAN event and proved your stuff, but then you come home and you're shadow banned by Activision. There's also no guarantee with these PCs of what has happened on them before you logged into it. If there was ever an instance where that PC had cheats or something that was thought to be a cheat or was otherwise suspicious, you then logging into it retroactively can harm your account and your standing with Activision in terms of those shadow bans. So when I learned that, I was actually rather shocked, right? By hearing this. And I don't know what those solutions are. It seems like you could obviously try and get those PCs maybe whitelisted before a LAN occurs. That seems like an exceedingly tedious task. I do not know how quickly a process like that could happen between a TO and Activision. I imagine not quickly, unfortunately. But it's now a huge wrinkle in it. Like, you go to these LANs and you're at risk of coming home and being shadow banned.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think there's a high likelihood you will. And the question becomes, hey, why, if overclocking is technically considered a cheat, and let's define cheats, by the way, in terms of Ricochet and the kernel level, anti-cheat that it is, right? Like, I know a lot of people are frustrated with its ability to catch hackers in the game, but when it comes to detecting exploits or ways to change the way the game is played, even something as simple as overclocking your controller can be flagged as something that is a quote-unquote exploit, okay? So right. Worth noting for the future. Now, a lot of our big streamers that maybe got shadow banned in the past doesn't mean that's why. It could be. And also, there is 100% confirmed, and I want to be very clear with the way I say this so people don't freak. Whitelisting is a thing. It is not a thing to give you easier lobbies, okay? Let's be clear. This is a huge point of conversation. Whitelisting is a thing for large streamers because they get mass reported all the time, and there has to be a system to not have them be banned all the time or they'll never play your game, right? So they are quote unquote whitelisted under the fact that if they're getting spam reported, it's not going to go through and carry them forward into a shadow ban necessarily, or at least there's a higher metric to do so, which is why they most likely are not being banned on their own PCs. But there is a problem going to another PC, and Katie is, explained it perfectly. The big piece is that on those LAN PCs, if they're not custom made to order for the event, and it is like an arena that has events, you really start having a big issue around the fact that you have no idea who played on that PC before you, and
you're going into an uncontrolled environment with your account as opposed to the whitelisted controlled environment that you have already established with Activision. And Ricochet is not going to be able to see the difference within that. Like, Ricochet is not going to be able to know, well, they're whitelisted on their home PC and they're at a LAN, ergo they're fine. They're not going to know that.
And a lot of people playing on LAN won't be whitelisted, right? Or quote unquote in that whitelist category. So there's a lot of issues that come around with it. They are logistical issues that can be circumvented. There are issues that you can work on with Activision potentially, but it is a intensely long process to do so if it is possible, aside from the monetary side of things, right? The monetary side of things is a whole nother conversation. It's something that I've dived deep into. There are certain arenas that are more feasible just because of the way they structure the scheduling of events, and some that are not. I mean, some, I'll be very clear, like if I were to go to an arena without any prior planning, without Activision being involved, without some sort of like profit sharing or anything, and just say I want to rent out your arena for a weekend, you're looking for, from a third-party sponsor side, you're looking at a 40 to 50 to 60K bill at least to rent out that arena if it's large enough to host like a Warzone Customs full map type option. There's other ways to do it, and I've worked with specifically like smaller venues like Level Up in Kansas City that are a lot more willing to work with the people competing. So there's a lot going on there, and I think the ideal situation, Katie, right, is that you go to a large stadium, you host a $500,000 LAN in direct partnership with Activision. All the PCs are being brought in from some PC builder situated in the middle of a football field. Like, we're talking like FNCS, like World Cup kind of stuff, like Fortnite World Cup, like that type of a scale. Expensive wise, yes, but limiting from the Ricochet side, maybe not so much. But anything in between that and like a common everyday $100 LAN is going to be very difficult to execute on from a technological side, if that all makes sense. So wanted to share that.
At the end of the day, the short of it is you are putting your account at risk every single time you log into your account from a PC that is not your own. And that is going to be an inherent and consistent issue for these players on these LANs moving forward, unless there's some sort of process that's set up between those TOs and Activision to either whitelist those PCs or what have you. And until that happens, I think you're going to continue to see issues like this. And I mean, getting brand new PCs, that becomes so unfeasible so quickly in terms of just the sheer cost for these TOs. Like no TO is going to hold multiple LAN events and procure brand new PCs for each new event.
I know you can certainly do like a rent structure where you're like renting out PCs for the event only and having them come in and be installed. That's totally fine. And a little bit more cost effective, certainly. But then you're still talking about, you've got to find a venue that doesn't have PCs. Like you can't go to an esports venue, which therefore makes it way more expensive. Like there's a lot of, back and forth on this. And I saw somebody in chat say something a little while ago. It's worth mentioning, like console only doesn't totally fix the problem, but would help the problem to some degree. There's also issues with like IP. So the venue that is hosting these events, we did a very small LAN in Kansas City with Level Up, with Bartonologist. I casted it. It was a lot of fun, but it was really small. And we, even for that event, had issues getting everybody into their accounts and playing without getting banned, because everybody was on a similar IP, and that gets flagged from the get-go. So if you're not working directly with Activision, you're going to get flagged for everything. It's going to be hard to get around. So a lot of planning, a lot of prep. Consoles wouldn't necessarily fix everything, but it would help. That then goes back to the idea of like, if we go back to consoles for Warzone, what does that really mean for us in the future, especially with how comfortable these players are competing at 100 or 200 frames per second on a 1440p monitor, and you're having to run a console game, and we all know console is not great for Warzone right now. It just wouldn't be a good look for Warzone, quote unquote, competitive. And these are issues that we've got to fix ASAP, especially if in Warzone 2, Katie, we're going to have some sort of a competitive league with LANs, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there. And the thing is like, yes, I think that going to console is one sort of solution, but it's just not really a feasible one at this point, because these competitive players, there's no world in which they will play on consoles. They hate it. And there is a hugely enormous night and day between playing on console and playing on PC. And I mean, I'm sure some of them will, but I know some of them would not be willing to do that, purely because they would be so frustrated by that experience playing on console. So unfortunately, I just don't think there's any amazing solutions available to us. Granted, Shadowban, how big of a deal that is realistically, aside from being a headache for players who get shadow banned and then have to, you know, reach out and get it resolved. Maybe for someone like a JoeWo, it's not that big of a deal because you're going to have those direct one-to-one connections and you can get it done very quickly. It then does become an extremely big deal when you're perhaps someone who goes to one of these LANs, for example, like Nico Infinite was there with Crowder, and if he comes home and gets shadow banned, his pipeline from that shadow ban to recourse is exceedingly more difficult and cumbersome than someone like JoeWo. So for some people, it's simply a nuisance to deal with. For other people, it can be a game-ending experience where they're just going to say, I'm shadow banned, screw this, I'm going to Apex.
Sure, yeah, especially for like at least a week, right? That we've seen that happen multiple times. I saw Clint in the chat say something along the lines of he did a LAN event, small event, and then went back home and was shadow banned for a full week. Like, that sucks. And so definitely an issue, not game ending, but something to keep in mind. Other pieces to LAN, just for y'all's information, when you start thinking about it from the back end, right? You have to make sure it's worth it for players. So we were talking about that with Ebatez, right? Like, if you're gonna have a LAN, it's got to be 50K plus for people to travel. I know a lot of people would travel for around 50K, especially early in the LAN's life cycle that we're probably about to start entering into. But you also have got to think about the fact that when you start looking at these large streamers, a Huskers, a JoeWo, whoever that stream to thousands of people every single day, they stream just about every single day, they make money every single day. They're taking a part of their time dedicated to their stream, taking time off from their stream and usually not streaming at these LAN events for all of the views to go to the main broadcast. It's amazing for a general viewer perspective, especially for small streamers to make a name for themselves. Like somebody like an Ebatez would love to play at a LAN because they could theoretically make main stage, beat out some of the best competition with 30, 40, 50,000 people watching, right? Instead of the however many people are watching in his own personal stream or even on a main broadcast online. And there is a bit of gravitas that comes with a 50K LAN event as opposed to 100K that popped up 2 days ago that's happening tomorrow. Like there's just a level of like intensity with the LAN, but there are ways to make it worth it for the big players. You look at things like VIP signings, a boost specifically for that player to meet fans and all of that stuff, different ways to monetize for those players to make it worth their time without directly paying for them to come. I mean, there are a lot of options there. And I think the other thing we can start expecting, Katie, too, is some of these orgs to step up and start footing the bill for the travel costs. I think that's totally reasonable in terms of promotion, etc., and something that maybe could start being expected if we start seeing a lot more LANs.
Yeah, I think so. When it comes to LANs, guys, I can speak to this from a talent side perspective, and I know Gojj can as well. If I am asked to fly anywhere for anything, my travel is covered. Yeah, that is because the travel is part of my work. So hotels, travel is covered. Food, not always. Sometimes, yeah, great if it is. Fine if it's not. But when it comes to these LANs, if we're gonna start doing more of them, I very much so think that there needs to be budgeting for covering at least the flight. Maybe not the hotel, maybe not per diems when it comes to food and what have you. But when it comes to that travel cost, that is an enormous factor for a lot of these people. Is, can I afford hundreds of dollars in travel expenses to then go to an event, miss out on streaming time, and come down potentially down like thousands coming away from this event, and then you're just never going to go to another one because it's not financially feasible. If you want to have these LANs, you have to be prepared to budget at minimum for the flight. And I think if you're saying flights are covered, then, or at least a certain dollar amount of a flight, say, hey, each person's getting 500 toward flights, that is going to go a long way. But yeah, I think those are definitely going to be steps needing to be taken for sure.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what those steps are. Who's going to take the first leap? I know there's some LANs coming based on the conversations that I've had with certain people out there, especially still kind of in the midst or tail end of COVID. And there's still a lot of precautions that have to be had, but we've seen the CDL go back to LANs, and we know there's more coming. I could expect that it is going to have to be Activision Blizzard taking that first initial large LAN event rather than a third-party sponsor. It is too much of a risk for a third-party sponsor to come in and throw a $100,000 LAN right now. It's a huge risk. It's doable, but it's a massive risk, and you'd have to partner with the best of the best to make sure it's an incredible event, especially if you're trying to be first to the market. There's more to talk more about that. I mean, I could certainly help with that, but I am not the most informed with LANs. Like, there are more people that have done this 1,000 times. You'll want to work with a production company that's done 10s, 15s, 30 different LANs, or you're going to run into some technical issues that completely could shaft everything you're doing and ruin your brand image, right? There's a lot of risk associated with LANs that maybe an Activision Blizzard direct sponsorship wouldn't necessarily take as much risk.
Yeah, and I think, and here's the thing, you don't need a production company that's familiar with esports. You need a production company that's familiar with putting on live in-person events. And for example, that's exactly what we had. I keep referencing the Wonderland because I think for a first event from them and for a LAN event, it was incredibly well done. The production team at Go Poker, fuck if they know anything about esports. They don't. And it didn't matter because they had the program, they had the direction laid out to them by Braca Bros on exactly what the format was going to be, what they needed to do, and how they needed to execute on it. When I got there, from start to finish, they had runs of show. We were going through our practice rounds with production, with Lucky and JGod and myself. Like, that production crew knew exactly what they needed to do to make that event shine, and they executed on it. But I mean, I agree. Like, production, they don't have to be familiar with esports to execute, but they do need to know how to execute on a good production, right? They need to know, what are you going to do with the transitions and the calls? Who's going to be who's the producer in your ear? When are you going to the desk? When are you not? There's just so many things in it that you don't have to have that esports knowledge. It's definitely helpful, but as long as you have a production company that knows what they are doing, a lot of it they can learn on the fly. Because at the end of the day, they're there to have the lights, camera, action, not so much the nitty-gritties of the tournament itself.
Sure. And I think if you have the correct hosts and you have the correct casters to be able to provide some of that insight behind the scenes, even if you don't have everything perfectly executed, you can carry forward stalls. I mean, you can see that even at HCS or anything else that's happened where the casters really carry the show. And that's what happens when you have great personalities. They can carry through some technical issues or otherwise. And so what I'm excited about with Warzone LANs is that the potential of Activision Blizzard to get involved to put together something large, that's really where you're going to see a lot of your payout, because not only will you start having some audience and show up for that, which is great, you also start seeing some real true value on main broadcasts that we really haven't seen in terms of not only viewership but also just an overall entertaining experience. Warzone, the overall Warzone landscape in terms of tournaments is great in terms of the number of tournaments and the amount of money, right? Like, I've got all the calculations from Warzone earnings. It's like 1.509 million has been put into Warzone tournaments since Caldera dropped. That's like less than 5 months ago that it started, and the success of that is fantastic in terms of the players doing their own content, but our main broadcast can only provide so much value because of the limited perspectives that we can offer. Customs are slightly different, right, Katie? Like, you and I cast all the time in customs, and we can provide overarching storylines, and when you start getting everybody watching on the same feed all together, there's so much more hype around that, and you can get the crowd shots and all of that. So when you start having a crowd of 1,000 people, that's great, but you're also going to see, I mean, Braca Bros saw what, it was like 35,000 at least average or something around that number throughout the entirety of the event on Twitch, which kind of starts reassociating this level of competitive play with Warzone that everybody's sort of written off as like a joke because of the issues that we've seen with lack of spectator modes as well as like hackers or otherwise.
Well, right. I think one of the things about that we talk about when you're doing those LANs, there is no co-streaming competition.
Yep.
And what I mean by co-streaming is the players are playing at home, so they're able to stream, so they will command their viewership. And there might be some sharing between them and the main broadcast, but it's exceedingly minimal. It's usually people coming in and demanding to know why the leaderboard isn't working, but it's because they're not spelling the word correctly in the command. Whereas when you're on LAN, those players directly are all going to be there. All of their viewers are coming together into one specific location to watch. What that does is create much better opportunities for these LANs to monetize them, right?
Yep.
You can say, we expect to hit CCVs of X amount right now. And that's going to get you more sponsors to put on something like a LAN, or maybe make it bigger, or up the prize pool, or help cover travel costs, whatever it may be. But I think LAN, there's so many benefits to it, but I feel like a lot of these people, I know that there's ones in the works, right? I know that for a fact, but I think a lot of people also might be waiting kind of for some of those go-aheads from Activision in terms of the nods of, we want to see more of these. There's going to be people who will go at it alone and raise their own prize pools and do their own thing, but I think it would really go a long way to have Activision either put one on or be sponsoring that prize pool in whatever effect, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I totally agree, Katie, and I think we've kind of hit all the points we wanted to with LANs. If you guys have questions on LANs, it's a great time to kind of shout us out here before we carry on to the last couple topics for today. And thanks for tuning in thus far. If you have questions or thoughts on LAN tournaments, feel free to DM GrandmasterGojj on Twitter, as well as Worlds Bedford on Twitter. Our links are down below if you're watching it live right now. Also,
Our
exclamation
DMs
point
are open.
socials. DMs open. Ask questions. We want to have a larger conversation around LANs going forward, because they're really important to have. And if the first LAN tournament, Katie, I think this is important, the first LAN tournament, the first couple LAN tournaments are third party, we want to make sure, unlike some events that have maybe happened in the past, we want to make sure that hopefully, whether it's us or other people, can be a resource to make that a great product. Because if our first Warzone LAN we see $100,000 is garbage, I say first, I mean like really full customs, full production audience. The first that we see of those, if it is garbage, it will be the nail in the coffin when it comes to quote unquote competitive Warzone, which of course Katie and I are extremely passionate about. So hopefully that makes sense. Please DM us if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, and we would love to talk about it. Also, we'd love to cast any events that come up. I mean, let's just be honest. Okay, so talked about the LANs, Katie. I think there's a tournament tomorrow we want to mention, and there's also one more conversation around monitor cams that I know we wanted to talk a little bit more about. Ebatez mentioned it. So before we get to the 15K and kind of finish off today, let's talk about monitor cams. Let's talk about cameras in general around the competitive Warzone scene, because that is a hotly debated topic right now.
Yeah, so monitor cams, should you be required to have one to compete? Is it fair to have one to compete? What about face cams, monty cams, all the different issues surrounding that? That's come up a lot recently in debates about certain cheating allegations, and Veiled being one of those that kind of spawned a lot of this continued discussion about it. And I mean, when I look at this initially, the monitor cam debate, and you've heard me talk about this offline quite a few times, is that let's be very clear. Players opt in to tournaments. Tournaments do not opt in to players. So I don't particularly care if you don't want to monitor cam. If that is something a tournament's dictating, and frankly, I have no issue with tournaments doing that. I think they should do that more, or have some sort of camera, whether it's face cam or monitor cam, like fine, let's implement that. If it makes people feel more comfortable in the people they're competing against, they're not there to cater to you. If you want to compete in tournaments, if this is what you want your livelihood to be, there are certain obligations that you have to be able to meet, and something like a monitor cam or a camera in general is kind of a bare minimum. So when I see people kind of lamenting this or having general issues with it, it kind of reeks of some entitlement to me, because again, you as a player are opting into the opportunity to play in a competition a TO is putting on for money that you can potentially earn. They owe you nothing in that regard, and it is not their priority to be catering to whether or not you have a camera. So if you want to be competing here, yes, you need to be proactive in those steps to get a camera if you need to use it. Honestly, if you want to be proactive and throw a Monty cam on just to have it there, I don't think that's a problem, but everyone should have a camera available to use when they are told to use it. Even if you don't want to use it all the time, if you have one, you should, in case someone asks you to use it.
I think that's right. I want to say, I put out a tweet. I pulled it up on a screen right now about, I really wanted to hear serious arguments against forcing face cams as well as monitor cams or one or the other, because there have been some joke things around it, but also some like not super serious, like I don't want to, or you know, some people just say, oh, I just play better without it on. I mean, I even joked about it on broadcast with you, Katie, about like no cam noobs, right? He turned up when he turned his camera off. I don't know if that was the reason why necessarily, or just happened to be that he was playing better.
Sure. Usually when they're turning off their cameras, they're also turning off their focus on their chat and their stream.
Yeah, exactly. They're like really locked in. And so let's jump back a little bit and start looking at any real arguments against it, and talk about what we think about that. I made this tweet and there was some decent conversation back and forth, some jokes, some not. And I think one of the big ones that came up, I'll see if I can find it in here, was number one, especially when it comes to some, no, Night, not some people play naked. We don't need to worry about that. You know, so right here, this is the big one.
Uncomfortable, just by the way.
Yeah, he's a troll. This was a big one right here, is that affecting their play, but it's the anxiety conversation, as well as the like, hey, not only anxiety conversation, but also, to be honest, like maybe they're not somebody that shows their face on camera ever on stream. I mean, there's plenty of competitors that don't stream with a face cam. I mean, even Scummin, who does stream with a face cam sometimes, usually doesn't. He just plays the game and that's what he does. There are certain people that like they have chosen with their Twitch account to never show their face, and that is their prerogative. So let's kind of talk through that for a second, of like the anxiety of having your face on camera, as well as what would that even look like if we started mandating face cams in particular.
I'm going to go back to what I previously said. The TO is not here to babysit your feelings on things, right? If you are choosing to be a competitor, if you are choosing to compete in a sports environment, you are opting in to scrutiny from casters, criticism from viewers, and a certain expectation of being viewed and being showcased by the competition that you are opting into. If you choose not to do one or more of those things, and you choose to rebuff one or more of those things, then maybe competition is not for you. I have a huge grievance with people who compete, whether it's Warzone or otherwise, and this happens in a lot of other esports. Dota is actually a great example of this, where you get competitors or professionals who are very hostile to criticism, and are hostile to having to kind of bend themselves to the competitions that they are choosing to engage in. And I just think that's a very kind of silly point of view to be coming from, right? Like, you are opting into a competitive environment and all the things that surround a competitive environment, and that means those standards, right? I don't think face cams are nearly as important as a monitor cam, but again, you're opting into something. They are not opting into you. If you don't like those things, you don't have to participate. Yeah, sure. But forcing people to kind of bend to what you want to do when it comes to something like competition, where there is money on the line, tough shit. Get over it, and either accept them or don't play.
I think I agree, Katie, and I think a good way to say this too is like, look, I think if you have anxiety with turning your camera on, that is totally fine and like totally reasonable too. Like, it causes a lot of anxiety for people to be on camera and show their face to potentially thousands of people. Even less than that can be really anxiety ridden and really start kind of taking away your focus from the game that you're trying to play. Totally respect and understand that. The problem becomes, hey, when it comes to a tournament, $10,000 plus tournament in particular, if the anxiety is really what takes you out of the competition, then you got to take care of that on your own, and that maybe competing is not something that's for you, right? Because this is necessary for us to go forward. A lot of people say monitor cams don't work. Monitor cams don't work. They can be easily hidden from. Agreed, unless you position them correctly. So when we start talking about the face cam / the monitor cam situation, let's really drop it back to how monitor cams are supposed to be used. It can't be a camera that sits in front of a monitor that's all you can see, because you can do the crazy workarounds of like OBS, duplicating. It needs to be a monitor cam that's behind you as a person that shows your back and looking at the monitor that we can then see the gameplay on to see if there's the red boxes or whatever, right? And not only that, it also is helping prove that you are playing as opposed to somebody else. There's been some allegations around certain people in the scene that they maybe weren't playing on a certain tournament. It was somebody else playing for them, and that could be an issue, especially if it's like a gender specific tournament or something like that. There's a lot that goes into this conversation, and there's nothing that's going to fix the problem. But we need to start doing the bare minimum when it comes to tournaments, especially with the amount of money and the livelihood that Ebatez was talking about. If we aren't doing the bare minimum, there's really no expectation that we're going to do anything at this point, especially if Ricochet is not able to help us. Like, we've got to do something. And to tease a little bit, we've got a larger conversation coming in some future episodes with somebody that has even a longer process outside of just the monitor cam. But we got to start with the monitor cam. Like, it has to be a thing. You have to have some sort of camera that shows you and your setup, at least to some degree, in tournaments. I cannot get around that idea.
No, I completely agree with you. And at the end of the day, again, it's not a TO's responsibility to compromise competitive integrity for your feelings. And I know that sounds harsh, and I know I'm saying in a harsh manner, but I'm doing that for a reason, because again, I go back to the fact that this is a competition, and considering the state Warzone's in right now, and considering all of the factors that already impact the integrity of competition, I just cannot abide, or at least give much weight to the I don't want to put a face cam or a monitor cam on because it makes me anxious, when it is much more important for the TO to take steps to preserve integrity of their tournaments, which impacts having tournaments at all and the longevity and health of tournaments in this scene, over you saying, I don't want to put a camera on. Because again, you're not being forced to do this. This is an opportunity that you are choosing to take a part in. And when you choose to take a part in something, you are also choosing to abide by the rule sets that are put forth for you. And if you don't want that, don't play. Don't expect them to change everything for you.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And this could be even taken a step further. If there was some intrusive download, like crazy intensive application that was an anti-cheat that you had to download and like, let's scan every ounce of your PC, and there's security issues behind that, like, this is a step too far that I'm talking about. But it's the same concept. If that was required to play in a tournament, it's opt in. Like, you just gotta opt out if you don't want this to be a part of the way you compete or what's a part of your PC. It really goes the same way for monitor cams, etc. The only argument, and I will give them credit, I was going to try to pull it up in the comments, I couldn't find it. The only argument that I somewhat understand is not the I don't have a face cam. You can buy the cheapest face cam out there for like 20-30 bucks. If you really can't buy the face cam, you actually have issues, like seriously, like DM me or something. Like, I will if you are a true competitor and you don't have the funds to buy a camera, I will buy you a $20 camera. I'm not trolling you at all right now.
Oh, you're about to get swindled.
Just DM me. But that to say, I'm kind of joking, but not really. That to say, that can't really be an issue. The one issue that we will run into occasionally is that when you are streaming and playing a game, especially Warzone, frames are an issue, and the quality at which your game can put out a product that you can compete on is an issue, and a really big issue in Warzone in particular. And adding in more equipment, like a camera, like hardware like that, onto your stream does add load. We have confirmation of that, and I know there's some people that have mentioned that. I was specifically talking, I believe it was eFuse Jason, I think his name is Jason,
yes.
that mentioned that topic, and I think that is a true and valid concern, especially with this, the price price of PC parts and stuff like that. But this is another barrier to entry into the tournament scene. That's just an unfortunate part about Warzone right now that we can't really control. So just kind of keep that in mind going forward, is that like the organizers can't control the state of Warzone. They can only really react to it. And if that means the more limiting factors for players, unfortunately, that's really what it means until there's avenues to get around it. That's at least my opinion.
Well, and I agree. I think when it comes to things like Wi-Fi versus fiber versus whatever, or the quality of the PC you're using, for example, a lot of that can very much so negatively impact you if you're adding things on like cameras and, as you said, increasing that load. And that is kind of one of the few arguments that I'm very much so sympathetic to. But again, that's not really a TO's problem. I think TOs, if those are concerns of yours or issues of yours, you should reach out to the TOs, see if there's a workaround, see if there's something you can do, whether it's with your phone or otherwise, to find a workaround for the issue. But again, at the end of the day, like, that sucks, but that's not really the TO's issue to be solving. And it sounds callous, but the TO, it's not their job to cater to you. And but also these TOs, they want you to be there. They want to work with you. So you should reach out to them. You should never go into it and assume that it's chalked from the get-go. Always reach out. Always say something. This goes back to when we talked about the streamer mode versus not streamer mode, and people who had it not even bothering to vote because they knew that they'd lose. That's not how that works. You make your voice heard because you never know if there's a situation or a solution available that is unknown to you until you say something. So a lot of this, I think, can be alleviated, by trying to work and find workarounds with those TOs. But there are definitely legitimate ones, like, as you said, whether it's your internet strength or how good your PC is or what have you. But still, at the end of the day, I have to lean back and say, I mean, that sucks, but that's not the TO's responsibility.
Sure, totally fair. Well, I want to jump straight into, we have 2 more topics to go through today. I want to jump straight into the tournament that is tomorrow. Katie, you and I are going to be commentating a $15,000 CharlieIntel and Boom TV production. I'm going to pull up the tweet in front of us here. I might be a little zoomed in, but I think this will all still work out. So if you guys didn't know, there's a $15,000 tournament tomorrow. Katie and I will be on the broadcast, which is exciting to get back into the booth together. It is tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern time is when it starts, and it is trios customs. We haven't seen a customs in a while. Katie and I haven't casted a customs in a while, and I love 2v2s, don't get me wrong, but customs are a lot of fun, especially for us in the booth. So we'd love for you to tune into that. But Boom has also been slowly but surely talking about all the teams that are playing in it. So I'm going to scroll down here and kind of show some of these teams as we kind of talk about them just briefly to give you an idea of who's playing, because there's some pretty good trios in this event.
Yeah, just in advance, I'd like to say congratulations to TBE on winning this tournament. I know that can continue to propel all of them toward that 6-figure mark for Caldera earnings. As much as it is a joke, I mean, when it comes to these trios, that's always going to be the one that skyrockets to the top of your list as most likely to at least be guaranteed to place somewhere in the money. But yeah, I mean, we can start scrolling through and talking about some of these teams, because there's some very, very good trios that I think can make an impact here and shake things up, especially in a custom format.
Yeah, I mean, Vap and Zam, they won our 50K, right? I mean, they just won a crap ton of money like a month and a half ago or whatever that was, a month ago. And they're going to try to replicate it in a customs format, which I know they're talented enough to do that. I'll be curious to see what they're able to do with Hadzi by their side. That's a pretty good trio. And then another trio, this one just slightly different than usual. It doesn't look like Hisoka is on this squad for whatever reason. I think he's busy with maybe an in-person event with Juki's. I can't remember. But Wars, Prodigy, and Skullface is a fantastic trio. Skull and Wars in particular play together quite a bit. Be fun to watch that trio. This is a classic, right? Flanked, Picnic Basket, and Nick Cool. I actually watched this 3 compete in a Rebirth tournament. It was a Chain Games event. They played together in that. So there's some really good teams. We'll keep
next one, by the way. If you scroll down a little bit, I'm quite excited about this team.
Classic.
They could go very far. That is Brolic, Foreign Jace, and Exact are one of those trios. I think they could be very explosive, make a huge impact within this tournament. And as you continue to look, there's a few of these teams that I would say are lesser known, but I think could always shake things up. And that's one of the storylines I hope for the most when it comes to tournaments like this. Is I want to see the upset. I think it's a more exciting tournament if TBE doesn't place in the money.
Sure. I mean, that's totally fair. I mean, somebody like Sitrep, Jesse Cooks, and Woxie's, like, they're a streaky team. If they're on, they can certainly place into the money. We saw Sitrep in here earlier, so shout out to him. Woxie's great. Jesse Cooks has been improving a ton recently and been doing well in some tournaments. You've got...
Noobs with? Wait, I just realized this. Who's Noobs playing with? Oh, wait, I'm a moron with TBE. I was wondering because I was looking, I literally was just talking about them because I scrolled down to Unrational, Huskers, and Scummin.
Oh, and you were thinking Huskers and Noobs or whatever?
My brain broke, but that's fine. It's been doing that a few times today. But something about these two trios that I was noticing, Gojj, I mean, Z-Smith, Stu, and Z-Colors, and then you have Unrational, Huskers, and Scummin. I would love at some point to see an Unrational, Z-Smith, and Scummin trio. I think that would be I would say Noobs, but he's always going to be with TBE. I would love at some point in a tournament to see those three play together.
Yeah, I think Smith can filter into just about any team and make a big difference. I think you're totally right, especially when Aiden's not playing. There's a lot of options for Smith, but he has played with Stu in colors and a number of customs, and that's kind of his customs trio if Aiden's not playing. A couple of the teams, I saw Clade say there's a lot of underdogs. I totally agree. A lot of underdogs in this event. We talked about Jesse Cook's team, not necessarily an underdog, but maybe a little less known. Hobu, great player. Vision and Gramalok, I only know them because I run Warzone earnings, and so I constantly am putting in small events that they're grinding through and podium finishing on. This trio will be fun to watch. I haven't seen Angel Walks compete in quite some time, playing with Heist, great young player. I don't know Carnage well. I can double check Warzone earnings in a bit if I am mistaken. I have to think back on that. Good to see Angelica, in this event with Jadar and Din. I've seen Din's make some waves. You've got Flex, Paluk, and Tojo. These are somebody's gonna have to correct me. I can't remember region wise where they're at. I knew the answer until I looked at their faces, and then I was like, I just blanked. I'll double check my spreadsheets later, but this is a fun team. I've seen them compete a couple times, not a lot though. And then this is another streaky squad. I mean, Queen Biddy, Attract, and Finessin. Kim is definitely there. Attract and Queen Biddy are very, very close. IRL and otherwise. Finessin, of course, a demon in his own right. So that trio's nasty. Jared, Tricky Rick, and Drakota, they played together. I mean, Tricky Rick and Jared have played together for a really long time, but Drakota played with them in CDLR stuff, and they placed fairly well. I don't think they made it out of qualifiers, but they have some Kim. That'll be a fun team to watch, and good to see Drakota back competing. Yeah,
Breadman, JoeWo, and FIFA is actually one that I am extremely excited to watch. It's a little bit farther down, but it's kind of another one of those back-to-back really solid squads. Breadman, JoeWo, and FIFA, swag super evident. Booyah are some trios in particular. I'm excited to see how FIFA kind of meshes in with Breadman and JoeWo. I think that could be a very, very explosive squad. And something interesting to note as well, it seems like on the women's side of thing, there could be some shufflings of trios and players you consistently see together, maybe starting to split off. And one of those is going to be Smixie and Ken's. Usually that third is going to be Brittany, but this time their third is Z Jelly. Brittany's in this tournament with other players. But that's something to note as well, does what we see here kind of lend itself to maybe they're not going to be playing as trios anymore in tournaments like this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to try something new. I mean, we've seen a couple things. I mean, we even had it in our notes, like the Noobs and Queen co-ed split, right? Like, people are shifting around and shuffling their teammates and thinking about new players to play with if they haven't been winning in a while. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's bad or worse or better, but it just means that maybe the Kim's not there to execute, and that's totally fair. I mean, you saw, we talked to Blast on a podcast not too long ago about his split with Mutex more recently, because they're a bit more of we can call them a streaky duo or a hot-headed duo, it doesn't matter. There are some issues there, and they're both really talented, and I love this trio. Blast has played with Slack and App before. Slack in particular and App both had a great run in our of course our 2v2 tournaments, but they're kind of coming into their own on Warzone and have won a decent amount of money. Adding Blast to the mix, I like it. I think their comms are going to be chaos and it's going to be great, but this trio will be fun to watch. And then the JoeWo Breadman combo, but you add in a FIFA kill. This is a team. This is a team that could be nasty. I know they've played in a couple collaterals together, some smaller event customs. So this is something that they're going to kind of execute on a larger scale, hopefully, in this event. And the next one I'm really surprised about, Katie. Not because this trio is surprising. I'm surprised to see Swag playing. I don't think I could tell you the last time I saw Swag play in a tournament that was less than $25,000 and was a customs.
Yeah, I mean, Booyah has made it clear that he's only ever going to play in these tournaments with Swag, and unfortunately, Swag had or he had some conflict come up in that 50K for the end of the Boom 100K, where he stepped out and Booyah said, "I'm not playing if he's not playing." So this is the first time I think we get to kind of see them back together in a tournament recently. But I agree. I mean, it's a smaller size tournament, but I'm very excited for this trio and to see how they perform in it. So I think they've definitely got potential to certainly place in money, if not maybe win it outright.
Yeah, another team, Nobu, Aizen, and Bling CJ. These are our Canadian friends. Aizen was the guy on main broadcast during the, what was that? The 50K? It was the one Merc and Maven casted. Tim the Tatman's 150K. That's what it was. I was like, what tournament did we not cast? There was like one. Aizen was on screen a ton during that event, the 2v2, and Aizen was frying, like twisted out of his mind. He plays at an insanely high sense on mouse and keyboard, and the only barrier he's ever had to entry in the tournament scene is he's not great English speaker, and so playing with a French Canadian players like Nobu and Bling works well for him. He's very talented. That trio could do really well. And then this is the trio that you mentioned, which was Smixy, Kins, and Jelly. I know Smix and Jelly have played quite a bit together, kind of on and off. And then, of course, Kins. I mean, Kins is, I think, a top female earner in the game. Smix is right behind her. I think they're like 22nd, 24th overall. I mean, they're deadly.
Kens is just phenomenal. Every time I see her in a tournament, I get excited. Like, watching her evolution has been a real treat, and we'll also see her CDLR. She's the captain for the Seattle Surge team that we talked about in that emergency lobby earlier, that we anticipate to be one of those teams making out of the top 5 in Seni Group B. I really am excited to watch this trio play, and definitely Kens in particular. She is an explosive, highly aggressive player, and I would have to assume no rooftop is safe.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. 5 Sunday and Uncivil Queen. That's a fun one. I don't know what it is. I swear, every single time I watch Sunday play, she is in the in circle one way or the other. Do they have a ton of kills always? No, but they are there in the in circle almost every single time. In a kill multiplier format, it works. You got to pick up kills along the way. We'll see if Uncivil Queen and 5x5 can help in that category.
For them is I think they'll be able to place well for multipliers, but my big question is, can you also couple that with a decent amount of kills?
Yep. Brittany, Braxton, Valid Hands. Brittany and Valid played a ton of events together. I know that Valid is very talented young demon. Braxton, I believe, is 20, if I remember, kind of on a come up as well. He talked about a lot of things he's been working on behind the scenes in the customs category in particular. That the team could do really well if they execute tomorrow. Queen Eliminators back into the tournaments with Traverse and Shimurda. Not a bad trio at all. And then, of course, you've got TBE. I mean, I don't even need to say anything about them. Everybody knows. I mean, combined, by the way, I'll literally pull it up right now. Let's go.
150K plus roughly combined.
Yeah, I mean, Almond here it is. Almond has 100K. Tommy's got 84K. News has got 63K. So what is that? 250K roughly? Yeah, 247. To combine, that's $250,000 between the three of them that they've earned. I mean, nice.
Yeah, and then kind of that final one, as we get to the end of what Boom has tweeted out, they'll, I'm sure, continue, if they're not done already, to tweet out these teams. But then you have Rated, Myapo, and Otterize. I am so thrilled that Rated seems to be getting back into the competitive scene, and is someone who has greenlit, does want to come on the podcast, so we will have him on at some point. But Rated, Myapo, Otterize, another team I think could do exceptionally well here.
No, I agree. I mean, they've played together as a trio for a while, ever since Aiden and Rated kind of split up in customs, and in particular, even 2v2s. But when they split, Rated immediately went over to Mayapo Otterize and said, hey, what if we ran? And they did well, and they've got the Kim and the skill to win tourneys. They just kind of need to piece it all together. You know, we've seen some crazy things happen with Rated, where either his internet goes out at the beginning of an event, he gets a sub, and then the sub ends up winning the tournament with Mayapo or otherwise. I mean, there's been some funny conversations around that, but this will be a potentially first big event that this trio would win together and kind of continue to solidify that you know, they can start being lumped into the conversation of great trios, like a TBE, like a Huskers coming on Rational, like a what have you. So be fun to see. But yeah, those are all of our teams. Traditional bans, I believe. We're playing 6 games. We've got the boom rules as well to be able to go over a little bit of that. But it sounds like just a kind of traditional customs tournament, which is great because we haven't seen that in a long time.
I'm always a fan of customs. I know that my opinion may differ. I know that 2v2s are exciting to watch, and they really are, but there's something about the competitive threshold being elevated when it comes to a custom that I love as a caster.
Yeah.
Especially when I like mini royales, but when it's the traditional customs and you get to watch the best of the best go up against the best of the best, that high level competition is always going to be excellent to watch, and we'll get to watch it tomorrow, and I hope everyone here joins us in that broadcast. But I think we've kind of covered that. So Gojj, I don't know if you want to kind of bump on to the next thing.
Yeah, last piece of conversation is really an update of what we had talked about two episodes ago. And again, we thank everybody for tuning in today. This is a fun piece of conversation, I say to some degree, is the convo around Clutchbelk. Katie and I had a fairly lengthy conversation around what we would do if we were Clutch to get back into the tournament scene. He has been tweeting incessantly about wanting to get back into the tournament scene. What can he do to be unquote unquote blacklisted, if that's even a thing, and how does he be able to play again? And one thing that Katie was so eloquent in the way she put this was essentially, hey, look, like, if you want to get back into the tournament scene, you can't keep complaining about it is not going to help. What's going to help is getting to the people that were directly involved, the Swishems, the Queen Shadows, and directly and personally apologizing and going from there. That's really your only way forward. And I'm not sure we had influence on that, but it was noted that he made another tweet about that. And one of our viewers at home, shout out to you guys, new viewers of the bot lobbies, we'll call you guys bots maybe. One of our bots tweeted at him with our VOD from YouTube and said, check this out. Gojj and Katie say we really think it's like the only way forward. He said, great take. I don't think this is going to help, but we'll see. And then later, Swishem, and I'll pull this back up on screen, Swishem tweeted out a twit longer about the Clutchbelk situation. I can open this. I don't know if the formatting will show well, but it actually does. Not too bad.
Say go ahead and open that just to provide some extra context around this. So our podcast was linked. Clutch responded to it. I responded to Clutch and basically told him that if he truly wants to come back, this is something that needs to get resolved directly with these people. Is that something that if that's something he truly wants, which is to compete again? And he had responded to me, and he had said, I apologized and moved on. Just because my apology wasn't accepted by them is fine. I know that I was genuine, and that's all that matters. Can't please everyone. Plus, all I'm looking for is a timeline from Activision themselves as to if my blacklist will be removed so that I can move on. Now, he then deleted that response to me. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't hate the fact that he deleted it because I don't think it was really the best response. But again, the road forward for him must start, and has seemingly started with these updates and the twit longer that Gojj has pulled up. It must start with him resolving this with Swish, and by extension Queen, but primarily Swish, and it must be a public resolution between them. And I talked to Swish because she saw the tweets and the responses I just mentioned between Clutchbelk and myself, and we had a long conversation last night about it, and she reiterated to me in private what she is reiterating here in public, that she doesn't have ill will toward Clutch. She just doesn't agree with the way that this was handled, but she is not a vindictive, hateful person. She does not want to see him be someone who's punished forever. And what I think she did here, culminating in all of this, she doesn't want to deal with this anymore. She doesn't want to have to think about this anymore. She does not want to have to receive hate from his community or to have it weigh on her heart either. And so she put out this twit longer and kind of basically just said, like, look, he hasn't directly apologized to me, but like, I don't really care. Like, I forgive you. You're fine. I don't think you're an awful person. And we can read bits and pieces of this Gojj if we want to, or in its entirety, since you guys can see it. But she put out this tweet logger, and I thought it was so excellent the way that she worded this, and was extremely mature of her to put this out. Because again, keep in mind, guys, this is someone choosing to do this when they've not actually been this is the aggrieved party who's not actually been apologized to, kind of having the maturity to be the first one in a situation where they don't need to be the first one to say, let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this extensively, and I know we even talked about having Clutchbelk on at some point, that we would love to have a larger conversation.
I would love to have Clutch on, as Swish as well at a different time.
Yeah.
I would love to have them on to kind of talk about this and talk about themselves. But yeah, so she put up with it.
Yeah, and so like the idea here is that she's forgiving him regardless of him not privately DMing her. I think that was the biggest issue that Katie mentioned, was like, hey, he did a public apology. He did 2 public apologies. One was probably a bit better than the other one, but it was more so an apology.
He should be apologizing too.
Yeah, sure. It was like apologies to the general public, not to the people he directly were. It was I guess all of his comments were directed at 2 specific people, not the public. So those are the people he should be apologizing to, not the public, yes. Right? And so with that in mind, Swish just said, look, it didn't happen, and I'm going to go ahead and just say, look, I forgive you. Let's move on. Can we move on? I know, like, even at one point she was blocked still by him or something, which was crazy. But the tweet notably blew up and really got a lot of attention from a lot of people. Everybody that even supports Clutchbelk, like a Z-Lane or Destroyer, otherwise, said this is really classy. You know, thanks for saying this, because she didn't owe this to him at all. Let's be very clear. Like, she didn't owe this to him at all, and this opened up a door for if there was a blacklist or him not being allowed in tournaments, which at least at some level, probably not like a true blacklist, but at some level he wasn't being allowed to play in events. This is a step towards allowing him to compete again.
The door has been unlocked.
Yeah, exactly. And Swish did it.
The door and then go through the door. Yes, and Swish was the one to unlock the door for him. And again, I think that's incredibly mature of her to do that. And again, though, the onus then swings back to Clutch, and it's really always been in Clutch's court, the ball.
Yeah.
And we'll see based on his response to this.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pull that up.
Yeah, and this is something I mentioned earlier because I saw it pop up on my timeline, and also something I've reached out privately to Swish to ask about how this went. But Clutch quote tweeted her and said, "We've made peace privately. Glad we could move on, plus grow from this." And I mean, this is what I wanted to see months ago when this first occurred, but better late than never. I am super happy that Clutch has taken this step, and I think it's a really excellent step for him to take. Now, next steps remain to be seen, but Swish, I think, just so incredibly mature of her, and Clutch, this tweet right here is everything I hoped. Of all the possible Clutch tweets, this is the right one. I think in a long string of maybe wrong tweets, this is finally on that right track, and I'm really, really happy to see it.
I totally agree. Excited to talk to both of them later. Excited to see what comes out of this. I mean, whether you think great or terribly of Clutch, even if you hate the guy and hate everything he stands for, that's your prerogative. From Katie and I's perspective, like, we like to see, you said this perfectly last time, Katie, like, we like to see the best of the best compete. He was fantastic. The trio of Destroy and Z-Laner and Clutchbelk, DBZ, really had great things going for it. It was contesting against TBE. It was contesting against Huskers coming and Irrational, and we like to see those competitors compete if, of course, they've earned that right with their public image and everything else that goes along with this whole scene. So to see some of this start to slowly but surely get resolved months and months and months later, it's unfortunate that it took this long, but at least we're getting somewhere finally. And also to see, of course, the classy response from Swish is just a cherry on top. So shout out to Swish in particular for really starting the conversation when there was no reason for her to do so, and in opening up a potential door or unlocking the door, like Katie said, to move forward. But that's what we'll cover with that. We'll talk more about it later, I'm sure, especially if things come out of this, if there's some results out of this besides some good warm feelings. Hopefully there will be. Who knows? But Katie, I think we've hit...
Next step for Clutch before we close this, Gojj.
Yeah.
You cannot emo tweet anymore. I'm serious. You cannot. There's ways to phrase it that do not come off in this way, but you cannot sound whiny. You cannot bitch on Twitter about tournaments now. Like, there's got to be a very mature, patient high road for Clutch to take in this process. And this was, again, the door has been unlocked. You cannot Kool-Aid man your way through this door. You have to wait very patiently to open that door. And again, I think next steps, no more emo tweeting about it. You can tweet about how much you want to compete again, how passionate you are about it, the positives, blah, blah, blah. You can do all of that, but no emo tweets, because I think all that does is kind of tarnish the very good moment that has just occurred here.
I couldn't agree more, Katie. It's a great way to close out the show. Hey, look, chat, you guys are amazing. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. If you're online and you're watching this in VOD format, we love you over there on YouTube as well. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've actually seen some great reception on the YouTube, by the way. Really, thank you for that. We have, this sounds so minimal for us, but a brand new account literally started like a couple days ago. I mass uploaded all of our other episodes, and a couple of the episodes in particular have done really well. We've reached over 100 views on one already out of only a day or two, with like no subscribers. So the reception to the type of content we're creating, seemingly positive. We're going to continue pushing forward and continue to create a better product for everybody at home to listen to and just kind of stay up to date. Because I know, although the state of Warzone sometimes looks grim, there is some silver lining that we always want to try to, take a look at and highlight, especially as we prepare for whatever the future looks like in this space and in this title in particular. So thank you for the support. As always, I'm GrandmasterGojj. You can find me on all the major socials, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, YouTube, everything. Twitch, of course, you guys are subscribed over here. For now, this is where we're doing our live episodes. We have our YouTube channel, and we are going to be uploading to audio very, very shortly. Katie, shut yourself out, and we'll close this thing off.
Yeah, you guys know it. You can see it below. Katie Bedford on Twitch, Worlds Bedford on Twitter and Instagram. Again, we are doing these every week with emergency lobbies sprinkled in when they are warranted. We've got a lot of exciting folks on the docket who have said yes to be guests on the show, and we've got a lot planned here. And we really appreciate your support, guys. So tweet about it, use our clips, let people know that this is a podcast if you think they're interested in it, and really just onward and upward for us, Gojj. I'm excited.
Couldn't agree more. Live every single Wednesday, at least for now, at 2 p.m. Central Time at twitch.tv/GrandmasterGojj. Go check out the VODs if you missed it. Otherwise, that's all we got. Thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next week.